appreciate everyone being so proper, but if you would, go ahead and have a seat
we're
and start your salad.
So you're going to go to your seat, and I'm going to go to mine, and they really don't care what you're talking about.
You're more than welcome to go ahead and eat. Thank you.
There you go. Am I close?
Yeah, I'll start talking and we'll fill in. You don't like that idea?
Oh, it's a great idea.
Anyways, John and I moved to Tyler in 1997. In about 2 years, he started meeting with a group of other physicians about building a clinic, just like Bethesda Health Clinic.
When we moved to Tyler, I started in a clinic up in North Tyler, which was kind of geared for the lower income. Kind of struggled to come to fruition just for the challenges of dealing with people that just don't have insurance and the cost in doing that.
Those meetings went on for like 3 years, and one night, John came home and he asked me the question after a board meeting. He was like, well, the board wants to know if you would consider being the first medical director. And I looked at him like, are you crazy? And he's like, we just need for you to start seeing patients. That is when I started having a very active role in the clinic at the very beginning.
When First Baptist began having the idea, the word had gotten out that First Baptist was looking at some kind of clinic option. That's when I began talking with people like Dr. Todd Robbie, Pat Mallory, who was over the missions and kind of one of our founders to help get those clinics started. In 2003, we were able to finally open the doors, thanks to a lot of community support. Grace helped organize all that in early days where there was no processes or procedures and things, and so we were really blessed to have that. And so in June of 2004, that's when I was able to leave my private practice over at Trinity Clinic and come join full-time and enter into a whole new world of things I'd never trained in any course whatsoever in college or medical school. So. One of the things that we've been blessed with through the last few years is the opportunities to do more specialty type procedures, more things outpatient, really in a setting that's kind of outside of the hospital setting, which is so limited sometimes by insurance and other restrictions that we can have a little more freedom in what we're able to do or how we're able to charge for that. So we see certainly doing that. Healthcare keeps changing around, so we're having to change around throughout that. One of the great ways that Bethesda is able to help our patients is through the medications. It's very expensive for folks to be on some of these medications, and so we get medications really two different ways. We get them donated through some national organizations that we can donate directly to our patients. I would say my entire group is very familiar with all the $4 prescription lists, but the other thing that we're able to do is to get patients on these patient assistance programs that all the pharmaceutical companies have. Things like insulin, inhalers, psychiatric medications. It's been a tremendous program that started small and has grown big. One of our ways that we help fund Bethesda Clinic is through the Hangers of Hope, a thrift store that started up about 7 or 8 years ago, and they've continued to grow to become more and more a part of our funding source, but the stores have begun to fill in somewhere between about 25-30% of our budget, which has allowed us to expand to get more dentists, more doctors, some nursing support, mental health, which we've added as well. That's been a blessing, and I hate to say it, but I don't really shop. This is my shopper, and now we're running a major thrift store, which is turning over all kind of incredible products. Bethesda Clinic has been successful through the years because I think first and foremost we gave it to God, right? And I think the second thing is it's been a community effort.
And there were many years where I wasn't getting paid as a physician. I was volunteering up at the clinic. But the Lord always paid the bills. We never missed a meal. And he looks at me.
We've just seen God continue to answer one prayer after the other, and then just having the community come on board. You know, these are just folks that just need health care, but they need it in an affordable way, and people go, yeah, I can see that. And things have continued to grow and just see God's blessings each and every day.
Welcome, everyone. Can you guys hear me? I want to welcome everyone to our 20-year celebration. Thank you all for being with us today. I'm Shannon Dacus, and as the board chair, I get the privilege of being your MC for today. And I want to thank each and every one of you for making the time to be here with us today to celebrate such a tremendous milestone. Thank you for being here with us. We are grateful for your support. We're going to look back at the last 20 years today. You're going to hear from some great supporters, some of our fabulous patients, and we're going to give you a sneak peek of what we see as the vision for the future of Bethesda Health Clinic, and we are really excited that you're here to share this with us. But to start us off this afternoon, I'm going to invite Dr. Todd Robbie to come up and give the invocation, if you would. As Dr. Robbie's coming up, I want to tell you all just a little bit about this great man and this tremendous community servant. He did not know I was going to do this. Dr. Robbie has been with Bethesda Health Clinic from the beginning. He was with the clinic before there was a clinic. He was involved in the visioning for the clinic. He helped create the model and the structure for the clinic that has successfully served us for 2 decades. Dr. Robbie also helped us recruit all of the physicians we needed to treat our patient base. He also stepped in and served as our board chair for 6 years while the organization was in its infancy. He has been treating patients at the clinic from day one. He still treats patients at the clinic 20 years later today. He and his wife, Vicki, have given so generously and graciously of their treasure and their talent. And I'm going to ask all of you to join me today in giving him a round of applause as a small token of our gratitude for 20 years of service.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. You were way too kind. There have been an awful lot of people involved in this, and I was a really small part. So but I am grateful. Thank you. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we've all come here today to celebrate 20 years of Bethesda, but that means we've come to worship you and to honor you because it's a recognition of what you've done at Bethesda for the last 20 years. I am immensely grateful that this was a God project and not a Todd project. You took a building that was donated by a man we never knew to a church that was founded 100 years before most of us in this room were ever born. But before it all began, you had a plan, and you created something for us to do. Lord, I pray, I'm grateful that you granted us the wisdom to pray and just to follow your urge and your leading. You took a group of churches to work together that were not always known for their ability to do so, and you created the Bethesda Clinic. Lord, I also thank you for the example that you set for us. You healed the sick, you fed the hungry, but you also reminded us that they would become sick again, they would get hungry again, but you said, I'm the bread of life, and I'm the living water, and no man comes to the Father except through me. Lord, help us always to remember that while we minister to the physical needs of our patients, it's the spiritual needs that last for an eternity. Today, I am excited to celebrate what you've done in the clinic over the last 20 years, but I'm even more excited for what you'll do over the next 20 years or the 20 years after that. Lord, I pray that you would prepare the hearts and the minds of those that will provide for the clinic, those that will work at the clinic, and those that will come to the clinic. I pray that everybody who steps across that doorstep will meet you in a very personal way. Lord, I pray that you would bless this food that we are eating, that it might nourish and strengthen us. And Lord, help us always to honor you, to give the glory and the credit to you in all that we do and all that we say. Lord, it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Robbie. You all can see now why we had to give him a little bit of accolades today. He's modest beyond means. At this time, I'm going to welcome Doug Bowles to the stage. Doug is a partner with WorthPoint Wealth Management. He is also an active community servant here in Tyler. But more pertinent for today's purposes, Doug just finished a 7-year tour of duty with Hope International, which is the organization that our key speaker, Peter Greer, leads. And he is going to introduce the keynote speaker for today. Please welcome Doug Bowles.
Thank you, Shannon. In general, the purpose of an introduction is to give you a good sense for who a person is before you speak with them, or in this case, before they speak to you. And so I hope to give you at least a couple of insights into the person of Peter Greer and brag just a little bit on Bethesda. It's been my honor to know Peter for more than 14 years now. For 7 of those years, as Shannon just mentioned, I had the privilege of serving on the board of the organization that Peter heads up, Hope International. Peter and I first met in Haiti, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But first, Peter's public life, if you will. Peter is the president and CEO of Hope International. Hope is a global, Christ-centered economic development organization serving throughout Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. Through its microloan and savings programs, Hope has invested over $1.5 billion in the dreams of 2.6 million underserved families around the world. Peter and Hope have been repeatedly recognized nationally and internationally for the effectiveness of their work. Prior to joining Hope, Peter worked as a microfinance advisor in Cambodia and Zimbabwe and as managing director of Orwego Bank in Rwanda. He is a graduate of Messiah College and received a master's in public policy from Harvard's Kennedy School. Peter has co-authored 15 books and counting, including Mission Drift, which was selected as a 2015 book award winner by Christianity Today, and Rooting for Rivals, selected as a 2019 Leadership Resource of the Year by Outreach Magazine. And Dr. English, if I recall correctly, I think you said you had read both of those books. And this is the brag part on Bethesda. Bethesda is such a wonderful example of what Peter describes as a mission-true organization in his book, Mission Drift. Peter says this about mission-true organizations. In its simplest form, mission-true organizations know why they exist and protect their core at all costs. They remain faithful to what they believe God has entrusted them to do. They define what is immutable, their values and purposes, their DNA, their heart and soul. Sound familiar? Sounds like Bethesda. Peter won't tell you any of the things that I've said about him. He will only tell you about the amazing entrepreneurs and other clients Hope serves around the world. What excites Peter Greer is not anything he has done. What excites Peter is what has been done by those Hope serves. Peter's been recognized as one of the most impactful leaders of our time. He will tell you that the impact that matters most to him is as a husband to his wife Laurel and as a dad to Keith, Liliana, Miles, and London. Peter loves Jesus, and it shows in how he loves others. Back to Haiti, closing story. I mentioned having known Peter for 14 years and that Haiti was where I and my wife Gwen first met him. While you will not meet a person who is more seriously minded and sincere than Peter about being the hands and feet of Jesus to a world in great need, all who know him well also know that Peter is a fun-loving person who will join in native dances in Africa or Asia or South America without being asked twice. Some of us have to be dragged out there. And who does a truly inspiring version of the worm dance on stage. Probably not today. And who is a very enthusiastic player of Dutch Blitz. Anybody here know what Dutch Blitz is? All right. So do not let Peter's genuinely kind and gentle persona dissuade you from the fact that he is a very competitive person, but competitive in the best sense of the word, because he is, after all, the author of Rooting for Rivals, right? When we were in Haiti and the Dominican Republic 14 years ago on a trip led by friends of many of us here, Fred and Carol Smith, a few of us from our group went out for a walk after dinner and ended up at this huge monument that had about 10 very large statues of famous historical figures in that country. Peter suggested that we each pick a statue and on the spot invent and share with the group a fictional, hopefully humorous biography about our chosen stone historical figure. Well, suffice to say, the stories were side-splittingly funny, but as good as I thought mine was, there is no better storyteller than Peter Greer. Now, the stories that we were telling that night were fictional, but the stories that Peter is all about, day in and day out, are stories that are true stories of lives changed by the grace of God. Stories told through his books, like Mission Drift, stories made possible through the work of Hope International, and the story of his own life lived in faithful service to our God and to our neediest neighbors around the world. I give you Mr. Peter Greer.
Well, thank you, Doug. It is so good to be in Tyler. And I arrived yesterday, and as I arrived, there was one place that I wanted to go first and foremost. As we were pulling in, before we even got to where we were staying the evening, I pulled in, and I think we have a picture of it, of this place right here. And where are the hangers of hope? I know we have some hangers of hope. I see you back there. I want you to know that everything that I am wearing today is from Hangers of Hope. Thanks to Carol Walker, my fashion consultant on that. And I gotta say, I don't think I'm shopping anywhere else ever again. I love the mission. I love the creativity. I love what is happening here. And this is remarkable. I don't think there is any other organization that could pull together the entire community of Tyler. The entire community of Tyler is behind Bethesda and the work that is happening. This is extraordinary, what is happening in this community. And I just want to say thank you and congratulations for 20 years of faithfully showing up and being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. I mean, let's clap for 20 years of Bethesda. I said that Carol Smith helped me with my wardrobe. Fred Smith has been a mentor and a friend, and I love what he said about Bethesda. He said this. He said, "Our patients are our neighbors, coworkers, and friends. We love being able to help them truly live an abundant life. That's why Bethesda is one of the best places to give." Fred knows philanthropy, and for him to say that is a recognition that there is something unique, there is something special, and I love what is happening here in Tyler, celebrating 20 years. I like how J. Chad Parker says this. He says, "Open up a dictionary, and Bethesda literally means house of mercy." Says, open the front door of the clinic, and you'll see mercy firsthand. And you've been doing that for 20 years. As I have had just a few minutes before, we had some time before this event, every single one of you has a story of how it connects to Bethesda, and I celebrate that, and I want to just say, keep going. In many ways, the question that I just want to address today is, what does it look like for us to stay on mission for the next 20 years? Because what has happened already in the last 20 is remarkable, but the question is, what does it look like for the next 20 years? How do we stay on mission for the next 20 years? And this topic of staying on mission is something that I've been doing a lot of research about. I've looked at it from an academic standpoint to say, what does it look like for an organization to grow and professionalize and not drift? And so the question for Bethesda is, because of what has happened over the last 20 years, because of the incredibly special community, because of all that is happening, how do we keep that going for the next 20 years? So while today is a celebration looking back, I was invited to say, and let's look forward. What does it look like to stay on mission for the next 20 years? Because staying on mission is not easy. After we wrote a book that was titled Mission Drift, I can tell you it has been extremely discouraging because individuals constantly will reach out and say, "Peter, you missed it. This is another example of an organization that has lost its way." They say, "Peter, there's another example of an organization that has drifted from its founding purpose and passion." So when I got invited to be here to celebrate an organization that had stayed mission true for 20 years, I said, yes, please. I want more of these stories. I want more stories of faithful service as measured in decades. And as we started looking at this question about how do we prevent mission drift from happening, we reached out to organizations that had at least 50 years of history, that had professionalized, that had grown, that had continued to innovate, and yet had remained true to their original mission and calling. And I want to share just 3 things that came up again and again in our research that might be helpful to all of you in this room to help this very special organization Stay mission true. Is that all right if I do that? 3 things to stay on mission, and I promise you I will stay on time as well. So stay on mission, stay on time are the 2 things I'm going to do today. So the first thing that we heard again and again is that organizations that stayed on mission, they believed that their mission mattered. They believed that their mission was worth protecting, and not just part of it, but the full mission. I had a moment where I was asked this question, and it was a question, do you believe that your full mission matters? I was in Texas. I was with a company that was looking to provide a grant, and I've never had a stark invitation quite like this. They said, Peter, we like the work that's happening around the world. We like the way that it is being done. But they said, you keep talking about your faith. You keep talking about Jesus. They said, put that aside, and then we will be able to come alongside you. And what they were looking at that moment was a 7-figure check that would have changed the trajectory of Hope International. And they weren't even counting the decimal points on that. Like, that was just 7 figures. This would have been game-changing for us. And in that moment, I said, thank you. Let me explore this. And as I left that boardroom, I can tell you that in my heart, I wanted to find a way of making it work. I wanted to find a way of still receiving these funds, still growing, and yet doing it in such a way that we could accept their invitation to just tone down Jesus. I believe that that was the biggest gift I've ever been given as a leader, and it was not because we got any funding, we did not, but it allowed us to start looking at this issue of organizations that make small compromises, organizations that over time make small compromises that when compounded by time lead them to an entirely different place. So we walked away from that with our eyes open, and we found some incredible examples as we started looking this of mission drift in places that it happens, and we found it everywhere. Mission drift is the common story that is a story that is not told enough, but we found it in the history books, and we found an individual that was writing about this movement from the church to care for individuals in need. And this was a movement that actually had a patron saint, and the patron saint was this individual as well. Does anyone know who this individual is? It's a picture of a patron saint. Does anyone know who this is? Celebrate him every year? Okay. I mean, December 25th, how many more clues do I need to do? St. Nicholas on that. This is St. Nicholas. And did you know that St. Nicholas is the patron saint of pawn shops? Now, the question is, why is St. Nicholas the patron saint of pawn shops? And why do pawn shops have, even in their very logo, 3 purses that tie back to the story of St. Nicholas? And the reality is that pawn shops were started as an outreach program of the church to care for individuals in poverty. Did you know that? Now, how many of you, when you were driving by a pawn shop today, look at them and say, that is the front lines of Christian service? That is what I'm so grateful for them. No. What happened is they got so excited about the tool that they were using of actually having an individual have access to short-term capital when they had a need, they could pledge an item, that they forgot their why. They focused on the what, forgot their why, and as a result, forgot their mission completely. What happened in that story is a story that is repeated, and the challenge is that it happens slowly. You are always one generation away from mission drift. And again, we find some incredible examples of where this happened. But a fascinating example is found in Scripture. There is these words that were spoken. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Now, who said these words? This one, the answer's on the screen on that. So these are not difficult questions here. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Is there ever a bolder declaration of staying mission true? Is there any clearer example? And I love how Joshua says, I understand how important this is. I'm making the declaration not just for me, but I'm making this declaration for who else? My household, that we will be faithful. And think about what Joshua had experienced. He had seen the miraculous. He had seen God on the move. And he says, I'm making a declaration. We will never forget the miraculous way that God showed up and rescued us and brought us into this land. How well did his family do staying mission true? It's a story that is repeated again and again. The answer in my Bible is 1 page. one page, you turn to the next book, beginning of the book of Judges, and it says this: after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors. What's that a nice way of saying? That's it. Another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors who had brought them out of Egypt. The author is making an incredibly powerful point. In those last few words, this is the most amazing, miraculous rescue the world had ever seen. Rescued from slavery, rescued from Egypt. If any generation was going to remember that, wouldn't it be the grandchildren of Joshua? He made the declaration, he saw the miraculous, and yet I believe what Dr. Paul Tripp says happens so often, that the passions of the first generation become the preferences of the second generation, and they become irrelevant to the third generation. The way you prevent mission drift is by making sure that the passions of the first generation become the passions of the second generation, become the passions of the third generation, and to 100th generations. That's the way that organizations stay on mission. So how do we do this with Bethesda? If you care about the full mission, you are constantly saying, we've got to pass that on, train up the next generation. No baton pass fails. We want to make sure the passion remains the same. Organizations that stay on mission, believe their mission matters, they focus on the next generation of leaders regardless of your role. And then the third thing is then they connect that with clarity and intentionality to every single thing that they do. Clarity and intentionality. This idea that there is no such thing as a neutral decision. Every decision that we make either brings us closer to our mission or slowly takes us away. There is no neutrality. So the question is, how do we combine our mission with the day-to-day decisions that we do? And what I found so interesting is I could give you story after story of leaders that might have been forgotten by us, but at their moment of time were involved in incredible outreach to those in need, incredible service to the world, incredible stories of educational reform. And yet you look where they are today, and it is absolutely forgotten. The individual on the left, does anyone know who he is? Oil and gas tycoon, J. Howard Pugh. Yeah, did you say that? Oh, no. Well done, whoever did on that. But J. Howard Pugh, this individual who had the Pew Charitable Trust. And it was really interesting that when there were books that were written about his life, you see this is an individual who was passionate about Jesus. He was passionate about service. He was good friends with Billy Graham, and they started all of these incredible organizations together, including Christianity Today. And I have come to believe that if he knew where his funds were being used today, he would grieve. Because he didn't ever write it down, though. There was never any clarity on exactly what his passion was, and it has been long forgotten. Individual on the right in that picture was Henry Kroll, and I can give that as another example. He saw mission drift happening, and he said, I want to make sure that is not my story. I want to make sure that that is not a story. And so he wrote it down, he got intentional, and every year before his estate makes any gifts, any grants, they say, in his own words, is this staying mission true? It is possible to stay mission true, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes intentionality, and it takes clarity. And I would just say for this generation that remembers the founding story of Bethesda, this generation that remembers the miraculous way that God grew something that was really small into this incredible outreach that is impacting the community of Tyler, I would say don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. Don't think that the next generation will automatically remember the miraculous. Don't think that the next generation will automatically remember what this is all about. Have intentionality, have clarity, because my desire is that this would be a place, another case study, not of mission drift, but an organization that stayed mission true, that somehow found a way of connecting that mission to the day-to-day decisions, impacting the way that it thinks about people, the way that it thinks about governance, the way that it thinks about support, to the way that it thinks about measuring what matters. I want to close with just one final story. as a way of maybe just remembering what this is all about. But this is a story that I was told after we released Mission Drift. There was an individual that reached out to us, and he was from the YMCA. And he said, Peter, I've got to tell you a story. And he said, I was doing a construction project on our YMCA, and he said, we took down a plaster wall. And there behind that plaster wall, we found 2 copies of the original charter of why the YMCA came to the United States. And does anyone know what YMCA stands for? What's the C stand for again? I grew up going to the Y. We had lost the MCA on that. And he said, I want to tell you what happened. He said, we read this original charter. We read the original passion, not just for the caring for the body and caring as a health club, but he said we read the passion for Jesus. And he said we wept because we realized we had forgotten that. And he said there's a group of us, we're calling ourselves the C Project, and we're trying to bring the C back into the YMCA. And they are doing some incredibly courageous and bold things to figure that out, but I can tell you, no one drifts to a place of greater passion for the gospel. No one drifts into a place of greater missional fulfillment. That takes commitment, that takes work, that takes intentionality, and that takes a community. And so as I am here in Tyler looking at the amazing things that are happening in this community, I would say you have an incredible legacy of what God is doing through this incredibly special organization, an incredibly special mission. Don't lose it. It is so hard to find your way back if you do. Don't lose it. Keep that passion. Pass it on to the next generation. And I believe there is going to be so much more in store for this remarkable mission of Bethesda. So you're never going to see the full impact. I hope you never see the full impact, because I think the full impact is going to be measured by generations, by what happens in this community because of what you have done in your moment in time and then how you passed it on to the next generation. So that's my hope. That is my prayer. We look back, we celebrate 20 years of God's unbelievable faithfulness, and then we continue on that path. There is so much more in store for this organization, for this mission, and I am going to be cheering you on as an example of individuals that stay mission true. May God bless you in that pursuit. May God bless you in the important work you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. That was outstanding. All advice we can all use regardless of what organization you're serving. Thank you for being here with us, Peter, and sharing your story. So you see on the agenda next we have a Why Bethesda. And so I tried to prevail upon Dr. English to let me just give you my monologue on why Bethesda, but I lost. They decided to go the video route instead. I'll tell you my personal story later if you are interested, but why Bethesda for me is because I was the family that struggled when there was a needed doctor appointment or a dentist appointment, or a sick mom couldn't go to work that day. That meant making a choice between rent or food. So that's my why. But we thought it best to show you why from the mouths and the voices of our supporters and our patients. So we have a video for you now.
I would say Bethesda is a really good example of what a great community Tyler and East Texas is.
Probably the premier provider of health services for the working uninsured.
I encounter people this way all the time, and I know the struggle they're having, and they're generally some of the most hardworking people, and it is just hard to get and keep medical insurance.
There is a medical clinic for the working uninsured right here that can help them with their physical needs, but also their spiritual needs.
We not only provide dental and medical care, but we provide a message to a person to give them hope for life, because without Christ, they're still struggling.
Anybody who's involved in this work looks at Bethesda as a model and a leader in this kind of ministry.
All the people that are associated with it are also dedicated to the fact that it is a mission and not a business.
They heal the person both physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
But the overarching thing for me is that we are trying to be the hands and feet of Christ. So I think that's what sets Bethesda apart.
They saved my life. I was so down and so depressed. If I wouldn't have come here that day, I just don't think I would have made it because I was suicidal.
I let myself go. I let myself go in society. When I was out in the streets, stayed pretty much to myself. I never trusted anybody. And these people made me feel comfortable at Bethesda. It gave me some hope as far as regaining that smile that I hadn't had in a long, long time.
Bethesda has helped me work, saved my life, made me a man again. It was just an awesome feeling, going from being in a spot where you feel like I can't afford this, or I can't believe somebody's going to help me maybe with some of my issues. The warmth that you feel here, it's like family. You can feel better.
They were non-judgmental, and they just loved me for who I was. It's amazing the way they made me feel that day. I'll never forget that as long as I live, when I walked out of here on that Monday afternoon.
Bethesda didn't look at me as a person on the street. Bethesda looked at me as a human being.
Bethesda has made my overall health better. If there was no Bethesda, just along with the blood disease that I had, I probably wouldn't be here today.
It's great to see how Bethesda has not only existed for 20 years, but thrived and grown and expanded.
I'll have to be honest, I didn't see the vision that Ken and others saw at that time. Certainly that vision was true and accurate.
John and Grace English had a vision for addressing this very needed group of folks in our community, and that brand of authenticity is contagious.
I don't know of a better organization that I could recommend to any donor than Bethesda Clinic because of the depth of the work they do, the breadth of the work they do, and the care with which they take care of people.
We do everything as properly as we can with quality care that provides care without pain, and then shares with them our love for them so that their fear of their own condition doesn't keep them from getting care. We take care of them.
If that didn't inspire you, I've got nothing left for you. Well, that's not true, actually. I always have something left, don't I, Mr. Fitzpatrick? At this point, I'm going to ask you all to indulge me, and I would like every single person in this room who has served on the Bethesda board, currently serves, or is going to serve in the coming year, April and Scott, to please stand so that the rest of the audience can see who you are and where you are. So now that you've been inspired by that video and you're ready to figure out how you can help Bethesda, any of those people that just stood up will be more than glad to tell you why Bethesda. And to close us out, I want to mention to you guys that you are welcome to take the flower arrangements. For the guys in the room, we have set you up with an early Mother's Day gift. You can thank me later when I call for a check. At this time, I want to ask Doctors John and Grace English and Dr. Robbie to come to the stage. They're going to give you some closing comments and a vision for what we have in store for the next 20 years. Thank you all again for being with us today. We're very grateful. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, you go first. Sorry.
All right, they sort of gave us our assignment, so I think I get to go first. But asked me to talk a little bit just about the idea for the clinic, and I'll be brief. But it was a bolster to my faith to see how God met every single need that the clinic had. It was difficult to wrap your mind around what the clinic could potentially become, but it happened every step along the way. The idea, or somebody mentioned a clinic that was in the Midwest. that did something similar to this, and they said they wish there was something like this in Tyler. We thought, how many places have the medical resources and the spiritual resources that we have in Tyler, Texas? What a great place for this. But there are a couple of people that were really instrumental in that too. Mike Masters here with us today. It's good for me to get to catch up with Mike. But Mike was our pastor at First Baptist for many years, and he helped nurture this idea. I was the chairman of the missions committee at the time, and Pat Mallory was our missions minister, and I know she's with us in spirit today. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell one brief story, and that is that we thought, what better way to see how something like this might look, but to go look at the one that's in existence. And there was a place called the Church Health Clinic that was started by a guy named Scott Morris, and he was a family practice doctor. He's also a Methodist minister, and he started this at a place right across the street from the church. And Pat and I went to see that, and we got to the hotel and we got to check in. And Pat didn't have her credit card, so I gave him the card, and we checked in. Well, I don't know how many of you know Tom, but Tom's her husband, and this was kind of predating cell phones, if you can believe that. And he called the hotel, and he said he was looking for Pat Mallory. And the guy in his infinite wisdom looks around and goes, "Oh yeah, we have a Pat Mallory in Todd Robbie's room." So I always remember Pat for that, and I think Tom will too. So, Grace.
I've never heard that story before, and that's actually really, really cute. So, anyways, when September 2003 rolled around and John came home and said, we're actually going to have a clinic. We're actually going to start seeing patients. I could not believe it. I could not believe it. It had been several years of Todd and John and other leaders that were just talking about this Bethesda idea. And so when the doors finally opened in 2003, we were just all in awe. I mean, it was a group of volunteer nurses, Connie Sanchez, who's here, Catherine Nailbone. They were there. Dr. Kendra King, she came to my rescue. We had 3 kids under the age of 6, and I was trying to start up the clinic, and Kendra came to my side, and oh my gosh, the pharmacist, Jeff Abel, he's here. I mean, there was just so many people that were involved, and just looking back at the next 20 years, and I see so many of y'all in this room, y'all have given of your time and your talents and your money into this God project, and we want to say thank you. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without you. And so we are just so grateful and just are so excited just to see what's going to happen these next 20 years, and it's going to be a great ride because Jesus is in control. So,
amen. Well, as I look out here, I'm reminded about 21 years ago when we had our first informational luncheon, and doing some Baptist math, we had about 100 people at that meeting. I don't know, somewhere in that range, but we had, even before a clinic, just the idea of that people would come out in the churches, would want to be a part of that. We had our 5-year celebration at the clinic, and we had plenty of seats available, even in the conference room. And then I see how the community has come out here and really been super supportive of that. And one person who doesn't want to be in the program, but is going to be now, and that's Diane Thomason, who puts all this together. She was with us from the first one all the way to this one and does a tremendous job. So I don't know where she's hiding. But the reason this all works so smoothly is because of Diane. But I appreciate Peter and the comments there about the mission and staying on mission. We did have, from very early on, we wanted to be that Jesus has hands and feet out into the community to serve those who fell into that gap, that medical gap that just kind of happens because of all the craziness of medicine. And eventually, that's why we added dental later on, and then mental health. Now, a lot of y'all heard that he said, believe in the mission matters, focus on the next generation, and clarity and intentionality are important. I heard, don't screw it up. I don't know. So I'll see what we do with that. But we have been blessed. We can, as you may be aware, we're 100% community supported, funded. people that come out, the volunteers have been with us from day one, and so we really only can do what the community has allowed. So when you see these videos and what's happening, that's because of you. If you don't allow it to happen, it doesn't happen. But a lot of great things have happened, and it's because of you that we do that. We started with an early motto, kind of a mantra that as we started this, and that was never make small what God intended to be big. And so we've had that as a part of our mission. We go through prayer and just really asking what God wants us to do as we move forward. We just want to say thank you for all y'all for coming out. We're blessed to have so many guests. You saw the board members. If we had volunteers, we had people who have been associated with the clinic, we'd have so many of you that would stand up who have supported through the clinic, and we're blessed for that. If by chance this is one of your first encounters at Bethesda, just know there's certainly opportunities out there in many ways, and any of those folks would be interested in talking with you about that. But as we have kind of reflected in the past and how this started from a bunch of crazy people who had no idea how to run a clinic or a nonprofit, we just said, we'll just start doing stuff and see what happens. I love Todd's answers. I remember when they were doing a development deal and they listed all these names of people that had all these money, and of course we didn't know any of them, but we said, we'll call them, I don't know. And Todd's like, give me their number, I'll go get it. But we're excited to look back at the past, but what really excites me is what we look as we look toward the future, what our vision is toward the future. And I think we have something that might show that a little bit here. That is not it. So we see as our vision that we envision that some greatly expanded abilities to provide services, some of these procedures you hear about, and also to impact more lives so they can truly live the abundant life.
We don't have this building yet, but this is a large part of our vision for where the clinic can go and what it can become in the future, and we certainly hope you'll join us in that.
Yes, and so on your tables, if you are not part of the Bethesda story yet, and we would invite you to become part of the story, and so please fill out the card on the table with your information and give it to a volunteer. And we need you. We need you to help make this happen and for the next 20, 40 years of what the Lord's going to do through Bethesda Health Clinic. Thank you.
All right, and we had one other thing. This is the modern world, so we have to get a selfie here, and we encourage each of you to take a selfie where you are and then tag it on to Team Bethesda. So if y'all are indulge us here for a second. All right, everybody smile. I got you all. All right. And with that, we are dismissed. Thank y'all for coming.